So to start things off, I'd just like to ask the panelists to introduce yourselves and let us know how you became interested and started a longevity clinical medicine practice.
Good afternoon. I'm not a physician, just a small disclaimer, but I'm employing quite a number of physicians. I own and run 2 longevity clinics, one in Poland and one in Switzerland. And I became interested in the field, actually following it for a while. But we started with International Institute of Longevity, looking really for areas on how to make it practical what we heard happening in science. And at the time, about 7 years ago, there were not too many clinics in Europe, the ones that I wanted to actually use so that they would be affordable and accessible in larger cities. And this is where we started just before the pandemic, actually, about maybe earlier, 6 years ago, the first clinic. And now we are a team of about 45 people between the 2 locations and growing.
So it's kind of a long story, but I'll make it concise for you, as concise as I can. I am sort of a natural experiment, an N=1 natural experiment. The experiment is this: what happens if someone who, since childhood, has sort of been personally obsessed with health and longevity, they go into medicine, and it's a passion. So what I did is I went into medicine for health span, so I could help and work with patients, and I went into medicine. I loved the science, and I wanted to apply it. And since at least college or high school age, I have been a voracious reader of anything related to aging and biology. So what naturally happened as I started practice in my specific medical practice is I started a personal, like close friends, family, longevity medicine practice that still is behind closed doors. Everything I talk about here is an LLC. So basically, I started applying best practices with them. And then, sometime after I came to the public as aging doc, I opened up an LLC so I could virtually free from any of the sponsorship, affiliate, marketing, all that stuff you see that's very common, not to disrespect, it's the common practice. But I wanted a different model where instead of using my medical license for that public-facing practice, I wanted it to be, I served essentially like a fiduciary where my client, what I've already discussed with them is in their best interest, and I had no skin in the game, so I didn't order particular things for them. So what I did is I opened up a virtual practice. I announced it on X, and hours later I had my first client, and it filled quickly. So it's a little unusual because it's concentrated for individuals and organizations about longevity best practices, and it's not a substitute for Longevity Center. In fact, quite the opposite. For my particular clientele, they tend to be high-functioning executives and entrepreneurs who already have longevity teams and centers they work closely with, and they're interested in an additional carve-out to take deeper dives about from lifestyle medicine to aging biology to help discuss challenging questions or things that are specifically tailored to evidence-based best practices. So that's kind of naturally unfolded.
I'm an internist by training and practiced internal medicine for about 5 years, and that was a long time ago. In 1998, I opened a practice, and I was one of the first anti-aging practices in Manhattan. It became age management medicine. Now it's called longevity medicine, which I think is probably the best name. I've been doing that for like about 25 years now, and I've watched the field and been very excited about the evolution of it. But really what started for me was I was playing whack-a-mole in my internal medicine practice, like we've talked about. One disease comes up, the next one comes up, you treat it. It's just filling holes in a dam that's leaking. At that time, both my parents were starting to develop symptoms of Alzheimer's disease. I was a little bit, my parents were a little older when I was born, and I, saw that there wasn't really any viable treatments back then. Took them to some longevity practices, or what they called anti-aging practices back in the late 90s, out in California, and got introduced to the whole field. And I was at a point in my life where I just didn't want to continue primary care internal medicine, so I opened this practice and sort of build it and they will come. And it took a while for the phones to start ringing, but they did. The Women's Health Initiative really, that huge trial that stopped women from taking HRT, really, I think, catapulted the practice a lot. I mean, I do a lot of hormone optimization, but now I really think of my role as similar to the way David thinks about his, which is as a guide to my patients to give them a full evaluation of where they are in the aging process. We use multiple biomarkers from the molecular level to the cellular to the organ system, all the way up to whole body functioning, and tell them where they are in the aging process, and then apply therapies that make sense for them. Everybody, what I'm struck about most in the years I've been practicing, everybody ages very differently between individuals and within individuals. I had a patient that came in and said, I've heard about telomeres. I want to be on this new molecule that lengthens telomeres. I measured her telomeres. She had the telomeres of a 20-year-old. They were incredibly long, top 1 percentile. She did not need a telomerase activator. Likewise, I had a patient that was in her late 30s. She came in, graying hair, was feeling a little bit tired, didn't know anything about telomeres. She had telomeres of a 75-year-old. She was a great candidate for that, but she wouldn't have known that, and she had not had her biomarkers done. So I look at it as my patients as an N of 1 experiment that we're doing in collaboration with them, talking about what risks you're willing to take for what kind of performance increase, for what kind of longevity potential, and help them navigate. As Dave was saying, guidelines are important, but I don't want to see them slowing down progress. And each patient is different. I think if you try to apply, like they did in the Women's Health Initiative, the overall average effect, which was proven to be completely wrong because we had to age stratify it by different years, 60 to 70, had most of the risk, 70 to 79-year-olds. So you can have all the clinical trials you want, and as David mentioned, we can't do this thing lifelong to see how long people live, so you have to use biomarkers of aging intelligently with your patients and apply the therapies as you've worked out together in collaboration, and that's what I see my job as, and I really love doing it.
Great, thanks. So when your patients or clients come in to see you, what is the top reason you hear that they want to work with you all instead of a regular primary care physician?
I think this is a very interesting question, because when we started, I thought we are going to have much older people actually coming to our centers, and also a lot of them would actually know about longevity. Most of our clients actually they actually don't want to live forever, definitely, but they are not really only for longevity. They are really, many of them are coming to feel better today, tomorrow, and to manage their health in a more scientifically proven way, because many of the biomarkers we are using are not yet medical devices or medically respected, let's say, diagnostics. But we're definitely, all of us, I think, representing precision medicine. And I think this is something that, and also what you mentioned in your slides, like very integrative approach, because I think in most of the countries, this is not an obvious choice. I mean, not an obvious situation in the medical clinical practice. Then the dietitian, physiotherapist, also psychologist, psychiatrist is working together with the longevity doctor to actually find a solution to various type of problems, because we are looking at mitochondria, we are looking at microbiome, at the scans of where the client is today, starting with biomarkers, different biomarkers of aging. But at the end of the day, the client wants for us to make sense out of that and give them some really personalized recommendations. And sometimes they come because they are tired, they can't sleep, they have hormonal imbalance, they want to lose weight, or they are premenopause, menopause, and they cannot find a good place to manage or to help them to do it in a more integrative way.
I would echo that. I mean, that's some patients come in and say, "I'm aging." They're like, "I want to slow it down." They hear there's great therapies out there. Some of them come in with specific complaints, but oftentimes they come in because they want to try something and they've talked to their internist about it or their primary care doctor about it, and they just say, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it," because there's not enough data yet, and they don't know anything about it. And you know how doctors are. When they don't know something about something, they act like they know something about it, and they say, "Don't do it." So that's when they come to me, because I specialize in that. I look at the literature, and then I measure where they are. And in the case of the telomeres, for one, it was don't do it. You don't need it. But in the other, it was absolutely. I found something that you needed to do. So I think it's because traditional, primary care, while it pays lip service to preventative medicine, and they do screenings, they're not really looking to treat the aging process, which is that functional decline that patients start to feel in their mid to late 30s even, and if they're athletes, even sooner. So, I mean, those are the reasons they come in, and I think there are a lot of different ones, but mostly it's because the traditional healthcare system is just not giving them what they want, and they know that this science that we're all talking about here is out there, and they want to know how to apply it to them.
There's a lot to say for both comments. First, I love it with your centers, the holistic approach, which I've looked at. I think it's going to take a interdisciplinary team, including health coaches and nutritionists, to be able to get people all these facets to our life, because we're multidimensional people in a multidimensional world with multidimensional health. And it also speaks to me what you both actually discussed. My philosophy is exactly this precision approach, where one patient is one patient. Now, back to the question in terms of the people that see me, I kind of alluded to this too. People who come to me tend to have a robust team of longevity providers already servicing them, and they wish to complement that team, continuing with their team to go deeper. Sometimes it's a specific question. Sometimes they see some contradiction. Peter Attia says this, but this provider says that, and things like that. I walk through, and it's from a supportive role, trying to distinguish between hype and oversimplification, going deeper in the literature. Oftentimes, as is the case for precision medicine, it's not a black or white issue. Not just because every patient is different, which you both spoke to, but also because there's subjectivity in the values, what two different people in the same situation and even circumstances might reasonably choose. The other important thing in terms of what people come to me for, is objectivity, kind of outside of the space, looking at the space, providing rationale and data just to help them with their conversations, their decisions. And I think that takes not just objectivity and alignment, so your interests are completely aligned with the patient's, but I also believe that going deeper in the data and balancing, on one hand, what's specific to that patient, on the other hand, a lot of guidelines are misplaced, and I don't want to overstate. I believe there is a role for guidelines. I think just like there's a role for regulation, there's a lot of bad regulation out there. So I'd love to see a day where we have more validated gerotherapeutics, so we could have better established guidelines. And then remember that definition of evidence-based medicine I gave earlier, with clinical expertise, patient preferences, this dialogue, what makes it tailored to them. So to me, it's kind of navigating that in a balanced way, where we have the time to go as deep as they want, even projects around specific issues, kind of as a one-person consulting group think tank, guiding them through everything that matters to them in health and wellness, whether they're an individual or an organization. So that's kind of my range of patients and clients.
Great. So When you think about what you're most excited about in your practice right now and where you see things going in the future, what really makes you excited?
Well, I think the most challenging area at the moment is the client's compliance as well. For them to actually, we know how to measure them, how to, there's so many biomarkers, there's so many ways to measure your current quality of health and current state of health. But stickiness, the clients also following the recommendations, I think this is the most interesting for us and definitely challenging. And many clinics, and this is also why we have the roundtable of longevity clinics, we are trying to learn from each other as well, who is doing what, how do we deal with customer experience, client's motivation, because we know theoretically, and there's a lot of doctors that know what the client should be doing, but whether they do it or not and how to motivate them, it's another thing. And I think this is something that we are all trying to find a balance with. We have more and more interventions. Some of them are lifestyle, exercise, meditation. We talk about very different areas also at our roundtable in a few days. But also, hyperbaric chamber, red lights. There are many performance solutions that are now in longevity field considered to be part of the recommendations as well, and interventions that we like, including brain health. There is more and more available. I think this one is still the most challenging in terms of what we have available. But definitely the number of interventions, the right protocols, because we know and we've heard it all, there's no one solution that's going to help us to live longer. There's a combination of solutions, and these combinations are also personalized. So I think on one side, having the right validation of some of those recommendations, the right protocols, and definitely different ways and behavioral scientific, the solutions from behavior science on how to keep the client motivated and engaged.
I love it, and little bird told me that but some of the things your center, the European Longevity Centers, one of a small number of model programs like NUS and some others I mentioned, that in this case it's targeting with you can have apps, you can have positive feedback, gamification, yeah, wearables, and this is some of the data. And in your case, your patients really know you. You have an individual that's a go-to, and you help provide that continuity of care. And by your this tailored approach, I mean, this is the center of my approach also, where you can't manage what you don't measure, right? And so you got to measure it to see what's appropriate for every person for that discussion. But what am I most excited about? I'm excited about to live in the first generation that I believe is going to have its first set of gerotherapeutics that are sufficiently validated in human beings for adaptation. That's my dream. I'm devoting a lot of energy towards that. I believe a big part of that will be validating rigorously biomarkers. Not everything will work out for everybody looking at everything under the sun. We have to have, while we personalize, we need to also, in our recommendations, eventually say, or already say, some things you can talk about it, but they don't have good evidence, and the patients or clients should know that. So I'm excited about educating government and those who are regulators in the pipeline from that desert between preclinical studies to reaching people, having regulatory reform and adequate funding for the basic science and translational of medicine. And I'm excited about longevity medicine's role, which I tried to define today for us, integrating the very best of highly tailored precision medicine, really knowing and having it specific to our people based on their biomarkers, which a whole variety of biomarkers. So I don't think the aging biomarkers are enough. We're going to figure out how to implement them with functional biomarkers and traditional biomarkers because they're not sufficiently validated to use solo, in my professional opinion. And I don't often give professional opinions to non-clients, but so those are a few things I'm excited about. And last of all, I'm excited to be working by esteemed professional community where everyone is bringing something to the table and we're having these discussions from medical doctors like us and entrepreneurs and those who facilitate and envision creating an ecosystem, and all of us invested in bringing global healthy longevity to everyone.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo those last sentiments, David. For me, it's been really great since I've been in the field for so long, seeing it come from a really backwater thing. When I first went to New York and went back to my alma mater, Cornell New York Hospital, I applied for attending privileges there, and they said, well, what do you do? I said, I'm an anti-aging physician. They said, no way. And now, the best scientists in the world are looking at this aging process and seeing that it really is the bedrock of everything that goes wrong as we get older and the bedrock of all chronic diseases. And now when people ask me what do I do, I used to say I'm a longevity physician or anti-aging physician, and they're like, well, what's that? And now they're like, oh, cool, where do you practice? So the field has really come a long way. I think largely because the science has evolved. Some of the experiments have hit the news. The original study where reversed aging in mice with telomerase activation in 2011 was on CBS, and now longevity is on the tongue of everybody that's kind of interested in health. And so I think what we're seeing is a coming together of great science, new groups forming, the Geneva College of Longevity that you're talking about, and it's. I just got asked to be on the American Board of Precision Medicine, the longevity section of it, now that they have a longevity section. So I think that all of these things, and then the Biomarkers of Aging Consortium that we were just at, where all this great science around how to measure what's happening so we know in an incremental level whether we're making progress against the aging process, even in very healthy young people. That's all just really, really exciting, and I think it bodes well for the field and for the health of the global population, really. Here.
Great. And so one big thought that a lot of people have surrounding longevity medicine is how do we reach more people? So right now it's kind of niche and not accessible to everyone. So what does that roadmap look like?
Well, I think it's definitely why it's more expensive than other forms of medicine is in order to use some of those biomarkers, they still are quite expensive to buy for general public. So hopefully with more doctors, physicians using biomarkers of aging, the price per unit will go down. But at the moment, I think, there's a few, in Europe, there's very few clinics that are still doing what we are doing. So the more clinics start using this type of biomarkers, I think this is definitely going to help. We are using, and you mentioned the Biological Clock Foundation. I think we are looking for the set of biomarkers, the minimum set of biomarkers that we could all use that would be like at least screening, the first step. And more physicians. I think there's still very few physicians that are trained in longevity medicine. And there's still, like at conferences, we see a number of clinics, but outside, very few people know about what is actually longevity medicine. And I think spreading the word, really educating the public as well what it is and why is it important to go to a doctor before you get sick. And it's still not obvious. So I think this is some of the areas definitely that I see.
Yeah, I mean, low-hanging fruit on getting it out there is PhenoAge, which was talked about earlier. Everybody gets a CRP, a chem screen, and if more doctors, we got more news out about that to primary care to give somebody a validation, particularly when somebody's way off the scale. It's a mortality predictor as well. So doing things like that, I think, will help get it down there. It's low cost. It's covered by insurance. There's online calculators. But I think, just like with any technology and cell phones, it's going to eventually get down into the population as the numbers go up. I have a device in my practice I use called the sphygmocore that used to cost $10,000 to measure central arterial pressure, which is a great biomarker of aging, associated with mortality, renal disease, et cetera, stroke, and is now $500 for a doctor's office, or even lower probably at the consumer point. So I think that's going to be a major technology that could be implemented into a wearable. I think we're going to see that sort of stuff happening. And I think, as advances happen that make the news, just more buzz about longevity and how you should approach your health care as health care, not sick care, is I think going to make it more accessible. It's just going to take some time. Oh, well, it's a device to measure central arterial pressure. It's not at a wearable yet, but it will come. It will come, and that's sort of a better indicator. It's a better blood pressure. Yeah. The device is here now. Yeah, they're debuting it, I think, next month, or this month actually. We're in December.
I think the big picture. I think the big picture of bringing healthy longevity in a way that scales across society, so everyone has access to it, regardless of financial circumstance. I mean, you all say, let's address the financial circumstance. That would be the best way to get, but I do think that there's a lot that can be done. I think it's first, before we talk about the cost issue, which was emphasized a lot, and rightfully so, I think we should remember that there's a pipeline. And my belief is that we're making progress in aging biology, but it's severely underfunded. The National Institute on Aging's Division of Aging Biology, that's a part of the aging part of the NIH that does just the basic science of it. Remember that hallmark stuff? What percent of the NIH budget does that take up relative to the entire NIH budget? That accounts for 80+% of chronic disease and cost. 0.5%. 0.5%. We've made a lot of progress addressing individual diseases, but as much as that's extended lifespan, let us live longer, the quality of those life is going down. So I think one important way of increasing access is to make available, because I think a lot of longevity medicine, I hate to say it as a longevity medicine physician consultant, it's an idea and it's a dream. It's a dream that is not so ephemeral that we can't start to grasp at it a little bit today, and anybody doing this today is a pioneer. But in terms of validated therapies in human beings that are based on the aging biology, that's a process we're only starting now. So invest in the funding, reduce those bottlenecks in regulation and clever ways of validating by biomarkers of aging to get things through and when we have therapeutics that show themselves to be the equivalent of GLP-1 agonists, not versus GLP-2 inhibitors. Anyway, SGLT2 inhibitors. In any case, then when we have that data, I think people will clamor for it, and some of this funding will self-regulate. So we need to remember the foundation. As for cost and what we can be doing right now, I think PhenoAge is a great example, and just to unpack that, Morgan Levine, she also created methylation-based PhenoAge, but the actual PhenoAge is just based on the laboratory tests your doctors are doing also. PHENOAGE, the last three capitalized. They're calculators online that are one measure of a hypothetical concept of biologic age. Why do I say hypothetical concept of biologic age? Well, the second and third generation clocks are a heck of a lot better than the first generation that were basically a way to just clock years. They are, in my estimation, insufficient on their own to really validate what your true biologic age. What's really happening when your clock goes back? Are we aging in reverse? I don't think so. I think certain physiological parameters are maybe directionally moving in the correct direction, but it's not like all the molecular damage was over those years was miraculously scooped up in that moment. And then you have a cold and you're older, and then you get better and it's down again. It's very complex. But integrating that into what you're doing now, which brings us to what I think we can be doing right now. this is what my practice is based on. I ask myself as a patient, what are the best things that are humanly possible today? So what the best longevity doctors and centers do in my mind, and do exceptionally well, is they do gold standard best practices across the board, very solidly, everything lifestyle medicine. 90% of that, in terms of efficacy, which anyone can access, and hopefully there'll be apps and other ways to scale. And I've talked to a lot of entrepreneurs who are busy doing this right now. But also the best of precision medicine 3.0, or 21st century medicine, as Matt Kaberlein likes to call it. The concept of integrating things that we don't know exactly for sure, vitamin D level optimal, we have some sense of probably range, but just measure the thing and get into overall where the literature is, understanding some unknowns. That's an example, and we can be far more systematic, involving patients every visit, so it's not just about, I'm seeing the doctor because this hurts, I'm seeing the doctor because, I'm not feeling well. You're seeing the doctor, not just measuring your blood pressure and checking your cholesterol, but being more thorough and comprehensively looking at your overall trajectory and how we can improve it for next visit.
But actually, if I can add to that, because it's a very interesting question as well. I mean, you mentioned some gold standards. In most of the clinics, we have a lot of different biomarkers available, but it doesn't mean that everybody has to do everything. And if we even start with just regular blood tests or even glucose monitoring, there will be much less people getting sick, or really monitoring our metabolic health. I think this would be a good start, and then you can step up doing additional tests. Telomeres is a nice thing to have, but like for us, not every client has to have it. The same with all the biological ages that we have available. For some of them, like in Warsaw, we have created a kind of a base test that gives us covers all the aspects of health. But it's much smaller than some of the other centers, for example, in Switzerland or elsewhere. But this is at least the first step. And then the sky's the limit. And depending on what the client is interested in, we can go really very deep in oncological testing, in brain testing. And I think it's just to do this, at least preventive medicine well. And I think this will be a good first step.
Great, thanks so much. So I think we can open it up for some questions from the audience.
I think this is, in terms of, last year we had this also roundtable of longevity clinics, and on the website we have our white paper, and there's a list of kind of more extended list of different biomarkers that most of the clinics are using. But I would say the basic really is a good lifestyle medicine test. I mean, a self-assessment by the client based on Lifestyle Medicine Association and with additional tests. Of course, we are really talking about good quality of preventive medicine, so very good anamnesis with a doctor. And the doctor normally in most clinics have 15 to 20 minutes per client. In a longevity practice, with us, it's at least 1 hour to really have a deep discussion and really understand your family history. And I think this is very, very important as well, to understand the client's history, because you can also do a lot of testing, but really to talk to the client, and I see it with most of the doctors, is really just really the most important thing. I would say genetic testing. We do epigenetic testing, blood tests, and DEXA and the metabolic test. I think this would be the main.
I would add to those, typically, there's some core non-blood biomarkers that I think have been around for a long time. Central arterial pressure, I think, is a very, very important one, so I measure that in all patients. VO2 max, not in all patients, I do that in a lot of patients, but spirometry for FEV1 is a great biomarker, predicts mortality 20 years later. And if whatever longevity therapeutic you're using, if it's making your FEV1 worse, then it's not a good therapeutic. And if it's making it better or keeping it from declining the 0.5% per year, then it's probably doing something. that hand grip, body composition is very important. Resting metabolic rate can be helpful. And then cognitive tests, like the one that Christin has, we use, there's other batteries as well to get a baseline. And I just want to say one thing about the earlier question. The earlier topic was one way to help move longevity medicine into regular medicine is to move away from normal range medicine, where you look at it and you see the highs and the lows, and you basically ignore everything in between. But there's a lot of opportunity between the high and the low, particularly for something like cholesterol, which we're starting to do now. It used to be 250, you're good. 200, you're good. Now everyone wants it below 100. But within hemoglobin A1C, with hormones, biological variables are continuous. There's not all of a sudden you skip over one increment up from 300 to 302, and all of a sudden you go from hypogonadism to normal. Traditional medicine can practice that way. I think you're going a long way towards practicing longevity medicine because you're picking up the early changes that occur. Hemoglobin A1C, yeah, you want to be below 6.5 because you don't want to be diabetic. But 5.7, you're all good? No. 5.4, 5.2, 5.0, there's incremental benefit with each of those. So I think that's another way to move forward. And that's why we do a very wide panel of all the traditional stuff, but look at it differently.
I think we need to be both comprehensive for a baseline and also targeted. So besides a set of a general panel, like, and if you're looking for that panel, that's European Longevity Center on their website, and which is good examples to look at with the center. So let's assume all of those within the domain of labs. What are the ones that I think are most often missed for someone who's already seeing a primary care doctor? So they have measures of their liver function, their kidney function, some of their major organ systems. The most often missed, in my estimation. And remember, I have an extremely tailored practice, so there'll be, depending on an individual's personal history, concerns, family history, etc., these change. But vitamin D I mentioned, something simple to measure and to optimize. I do believe that the reference range, as you alluded to, they're based on averages in a college cohort of volunteers decades ago. Not necessarily healthy. Do we want to be middle of the road if we look at other people's health trajectory? Probably not. So we want to think about what's optimal level, at least insofar as we have enough data and where there's little downside. So besides vitamin D, the vitamin B12, you'd be surprised how many individuals don't have special unusual diets that like or different diets like vegan that are deficient on B12. There are certain medications and over-the-counter supplements that may lead to a deficiency, genetics, and that's something that if it's too low, it's associated with neurocognitive decline as well as paresthesias, these tingling, other things. Another one that I believe should be measured at least once in a lifetime. And though the U.S. does not think so yet, Canada and Europe recently have. It's an Lp(a).
Oh, yeah.
So everybody should know that. Now, it's not that Lp(a). Imagine a capital L, a lowercase p, I'm making this like a Klein. You need to take your time. Make sure people write it down. And then an open parentheses, lowercase a, close parentheses. So you pronounce it Lp(a). And that is a measure of what's actually an independent risk factor for cardiovascular disease burden than not just total cholesterol, which is very crude and has big issues, or LDL, which is more decent than a lot of people who know a lot give credit, but it misses an important segment, or even ApoB, which is better than LDL. If you have LDL, yeah, well, that's a controversy. I'm saying it captures a risk that the others don't. There are other ways which may in turn change your target for what your lipid should be to kind of compensate for it. There's actually some new therapeutics coming out. They're unfortunately not, the treatments aren't affordable or easily accessible right now, but they're coming, and as things scale, as we're saying, things get more affordable. So that's one avenue of optimization, but there are others.
I would just say one thing about LPA. 20% of people have high an abnormal LPA, which vastly increases your risk of coronary heart disease, but only 1% of people know what their LPA is. And that's something that is really low-hanging fruit, and every longevity physician should be a preventative cardiologist. I mean, you got to protect that system. So if you don't know what your LPA is, find out as soon as you can.
Yes.
And
So just to finish up to do justice to your question, I think it's important to know your metabolic health, and CGMs or continuous glucose monitors I found helpful. They are not considered by most an evidence-based method because of some shortcomings in the current literature. But we do know that hemoglobin A1C is, even at the pre-diabetic levels, is a risk factor for multiple morbidities, CNS as well as cardiovascular. So it doesn't hurt to have lower and less spikes, which there's some data that the spikes or postprandial glucose excursions, the fancy name, higher glucose after a meal. So my experience with that is I was able to lower my through dietary modifications and seeing what the triggers are. And the poor man's way of that, if you don't want to attach a device or invest in one, is just a finger glucometer, little pinprick, which you can get in the diabetes section of your local CVS, Walgreens, or pharmacy. There are many other higher tech things that we could be talking about, but I think I'll stop there for the sake of time.
Thanks so much. Stephen, do you have a really quick one?
Really quick one.
Okay.
So it seems that longevity clinics are about giving good advice to probably high net worth individuals. It reminds me of a financial advisor who, financial advisors are really measured based on how much more do they beat the market than just an index fund. So how long until your practices are going to be measured by how much better your clients do than the average? And amongst the three of you, who generates the highest rate of return for your customers?
I can tell you already, I don't answer that question. I accept no more than 10 clients at a time.
It's a great question. I think of what I do as sort of helping people in the same way as a financial advisor does. They have their portfolio dashboard, and I have a software product called PhysioAge that measures your health dashboard, essentially. And we have biomarkers of aging in there. We have health status indicators, part of the report card. We look at every organ system and grade across the whole range of potential values you could have from A to F, what your grade is. And my job is to lower the overall biological age, which is called the physio age, and improve the health status indicators. And I go over that at the end of the year with the patient. This is progress we've made. Some of it is because maybe I haven't done my job as well. Maybe you haven't been as compliant, but that's the target. The target is to improve the health with those metrics.
Yeah, and we are measuring results, and KPIs of our doctors are measured actually on how much the biological age has changed after 1 year or after 2 years.
And to directly to your point, I have an MBA background, so just the closest thing to what you're discussing here is the advent of accountable care organizations and other risk-sharing models at a hospital institution level, which in principle could be at a longevity center it's multidisciplinary. So the concept is you have a report card where you can standardize, just like you can look at for like surgeons, like in New York State, to see how many complications they have. Now there's a challenge there because there's the potential for self-selection bias. It's not randomized to you. So for example, if you have a surgeon who's like really, really good, that everybody gives them the hard cases nobody else takes, he might have worse averages because he takes on only the hard cases. But this idea of tying the value proposition to patients in health and outcomes, I think that's the holy grail. That's the holy grail of alignment. We're moving there as a society, and we're making progress in that direction. I think it's a great thing.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.